April 1945. Berlin is collapsing. Flames devour the city while tanks roll through the streets, grinding over the ruins of the Reich. In the shattered Kreuzberg district, 15-year-old Klaus Becker crouches behind a pile of rubble. Across his thin shoulders lies a heavy Panzerfaust anti-tank weapon. His hands shake, from fear, hunger, exhaustion. The oversized uniform hangs loose on his frail frame. The Volkssturm armband around his arm feels less like a symbol of duty and more like a noose. From somewhere ahead comes the sound he's been dreading, the deep, rhythmic rumble of American tanks, the clipped shouts of English voices. For 3 days, his unit, a handful of boys and a few elderly men, has been pushed block by block through the city. Now there's nowhere left to retreat. The words of his missing SS officer echo in his head. Americans don't take prisoners. They torture and execute. Fight to the last bullet or use it on yourself. Klaus had believed it completely. Why wouldn't he? He'd been told the same thing since childhood, that Americans were beasts, that surrender meant horror. For years, Nazi propaganda had taught him that death for the Führer was glorious, and mercy from the enemy impossible. The tank halts. The turret slowly swings toward him. He closes his eyes, waiting for the shell that will end everything. But instead, a voice calls out, rough, accented, but in German. "Come out, boy. Put down your weapon." Klaus freezes. Boy, not enemy. Must be a trick. The propaganda said they would kill him the moment he showed himself. But the voice comes again, firm but not cruel. "We won't shoot. Come out." He hesitates. The radio, the posters, the teachers, all of them said surrender means death. But those same voices also said the Wehrmacht was winning. He's seen the truth with his own eyes. Berlin burning, soldiers fleeing, the Reich collapsing. What if they lied about this too? Klaus lowers the Panzerfaust, slowly stands and raises his trembling hands. "Don't shoot," he cries. From behind the tank emerge 3 American soldiers, weapons ready but not firing. They're giants compared to him. One of them, a black soldier, steps forward. Klaus's breath catches. He's been told men like this are savage, less than human. He shuts his eyes again, bracing for the bullet. But instead, he feels a hand on his shoulder, steady, not violent. When he opens his eyes, the black soldier is holding out a canteen. "Trinken," the man says, "drink." Klaus stares at the water, at the soldier's face. There's no hatred there. No cruelty. Just concern. He drinks. The water is cool, clean, the best thing he's tasted in weeks. When he finishes, the soldier nods and gestures toward the rear, where other prisoners sit quietly under guard. No torture. No beatings. Just water, food, and silence. Every belief Klaus has ever held begins to collapse. The monsters were human. The barbarians were merciful. Everything he had been taught was a lie. Children in uniform. The Volkssturm, or People's Storm, was Nazi Germany's final act of desperation. Formed in late 1944, it conscripted all males aged 16 to 60 who weren't already in service. But as the Reich crumbled, the rules vanished. Boys as young as 12 were handed armbands, obsolete rifles, and sent to die against professional armies. Training often lasted only a few days. Most received a rifle with barely a handful of bullets, sometimes none at all. They were indoctrinated, not prepared. Klaus had joined the Hitler Youth at 10. For 5 years he had marched, drilled, and listened to endless lectures about German superiority and Allied brutality. He was taught that surrender was shameful, that mercy was weakness, that death for the Führer was the highest honor. When he was drafted into the Volkssturm in April 1945, he was terrified, but proud. He thought he was defending his homeland. Within hours of combat, that illusion shattered. He watched friends die from their own weapons, saw tanks crush boys barely old enough to shave. They were not soldiers. They were frightened children with guns. The propaganda that killed. For years, Nazi propaganda had prepared German youth to fear capture more than death. Textbooks described Allied atrocities. Radio programs told stories of Germans being tortured. Posters depicted Americans and Britons as monsters who mutilated prisoners. To children already steeped in Nazi racial ideology, it all made perfect sense. If Germans were the master race, then surely the inferior enemies would behave like animals if they ever won. That belief made teenage soldiers fight with suicidal determination. They'd rather die than be taken alive. Some even carried cyanide pills for that purpose. One 16-year-old captured near Würzburg later recalled, "I was told Americans skinned prisoners alive. When they surrounded us, I tried to shoot myself. An American knocked the rifle from my mouth. He looked horrified, not cruel. I thought he was about to torture me. Instead, he said, "Jesus Christ, he's just a kid." The Americans' dilemma. By the spring of 1945, U.S. troops advancing into Germany began encountering these child soldiers regularly. Battle-hardened men who had fought through Normandy, the Ardennes, and the Rhine now faced boys, some barely teenagers, wearing oversized uniforms and clutching ancient rifles. It created a nightmare of conscience. Rules of war were clear. An armed enemy was a target regardless of age. But when that enemy was a child, every instinct screamed to hold fire. Many soldiers hesitated, and some died because of it. Others had no choice but to shoot back, haunted forever by the faces of the boys they killed. Sergeant Robert Mitchell of the 3rd Infantry Division described one encounter near Nuremberg. "We stormed a house after taking fire. Inside were 5 kids, 14 maybe 15. 2 were dead. 3 surrendered, crying, certain we'd execute them. My buddy started crying too. He had a son that age back home." There were no right answers that day. American soldiers began adapting on their own. They would call out in German before firing, urging surrender. They risked their lives trying to capture, not kill. There was no official policy, just human instinct. Private Eugene Henderson explained, "If I saw a kid with a gun, I did everything I could to make him give up first. I even learned the German for, 'Drop your weapon, boy.' I'd rather take a bullet than live knowing I killed a child." Mercy over revenge. Once captured, these boys were treated differently from adult prisoners. Medics tended to them first. They received larger food portions, lighter interrogations, and faster repatriation. There was no vengeance, only practicality and compassion. For the Americans, killing children, even enemy children, violated everything they believed they were fighting for. And for the Germans, it was the first crack in a lifetime of indoctrination. Klaus's awakening. After his surrender, Klaus sat among other captured boys, some just 13, none older than 17. They were given water, rations, and blankets. A medic cleaned their wounds. The guards watched them quietly, not cruelly. Klaus kept waiting for the torture to begin. But the Americans seemed indifferent, tired, professional. One soldier read a letter from home. Another ate chocolate. No one looked like a monster. The same black soldier who had given him water earlier returned with food. Klaus flinched. The man stopped, then spoke carefully in German. "Niemand wird dir wehtun. No one will hurt you." That moment stayed with Klaus for the rest of his life. He would later say, "When that soldier told me no one would hurt me and I saw he meant it, that's when everything I believed collapsed." The lies about American cruelty, about racial superiority, about the Führer, all of it. A man I was told was subhuman showed me more humanity than my own country ever had. Life in captivity. Klaus spent 7 months in an American POW camp near Mannheim. It was nothing like the nightmare he'd been promised. He was fed regularly, treated for malnutrition, given clothes, and even taught English by a guard who had sons his age. There were lessons, sports, and, above all, safety. Other captured boys told similar stories. For many, the camps became the first place where they could think freely, away from the suffocating grip of Nazi ideology. They realized the enemy wasn't who they'd been told it was. The true evil had been their own government, the one that sent children to die. After the war, when Klaus returned to Berlin in November 1945, the city was rubble. His father was dead. His mother lived in a cellar. She had assumed her son had perished like so many others. But there he stood, alive, fed, wearing American clothes, carrying a letter from the guard who taught him English. When he told her he'd been captured by Americans and treated kindly, she wept. "They told us you would be killed," she said. "They told us Americans murdered prisoners. I grieved you as dead, but you came home alive. Everything they said was lies." This story repeated across Germany. Families who expected their sons to be executed received them back healthy and humane. That contrast between propaganda and reality became a foundation for post-war reconciliation. Many of those former child soldiers grew up to be advocates for peace and democracy. They had seen the truth for themselves. The difference between barbarism and civilization wasn't nationality, it was morality. One of them, Peter Hoffman, who lost his leg but survived thanks to American medics, later wrote, "I tried to kill them and they saved me. That mercy taught me what it means to be human." Legacy of mercy. Between March and May 1945, American forces faced tens of thousands of German child soldiers. Thousands died in combat. But those captured, roughly 20,000, were treated humanely, and 95% returned home alive. Their survival stood as silent proof of something remarkable. Even in war, compassion can endure. For American soldiers, the memories never faded. Many wrestled with guilt for years, guilt for having shot at children, guilt for hesitating and losing comrades, guilt simply for surviving. But others found redemption in the moments they chose mercy over vengeance. Captain William Hayes, who fought in Germany, later reflected, "We faced kids turned into weapons. That wasn't their fault, it was their government's." We learned then that the greatest victory isn't just defeating an enemy. It's refusing to become what you're fighting against. The story of Klaus Becker and thousands like him reminds us, even in the darkest hour of humanity, compassion can break through propaganda, fear, and hate. Sometimes the most powerful act of war is mercy.